You know, for a world facing political crises exacerbated by brand new technologies, our ideas about what makes someone persuasive come from a surprisingly early source: ancient Greece. While charismatic populists exploit online audiences today, we still rely on Aristotle's ideas of logos, pathos, and ethos to explain their appeal. And that got me thinking, have we really not come up with better than that in the last 2,000 years? Is there an alternative framework that maybe couldn't be used for nefarious purposes? One that might help ordinary people stop populists from dominating public debate? This would be a task fit for an academic, philosophical, inquiring mind. But I couldn't find one, dear viewer, so you've got me instead, a doctor that makes YouTube videos about it in their spare time. I'd like to think this video could be your guide to a different, maybe even a better framework for mastering insightful discourse today, based on 3 vital arts we should all learn. The first is the art of argument. This concerns how to use your words to build a logical case and respond to your opponents. In my life, I've always been really amazed by really good competitive debaters because they can take any position and make it sound convincing, even without any specialist knowledge. I'm going to tell you the 2 main aspects to this art, and the first is structure. In the realm of crafting compelling arguments, the microstructure is your foundation. Imagine each claim is like a brick, and it's up to you to lay them out strategically to construct a solid and convincing argument. You have 3 types of brick: central points, supporting evidence, and relevance claims. And these are each essential parts of each individual argument. Microstructure also makes you think about the formulation and purpose of each claim. For example, your evidence for an argument might be formulated as a quote, or an analogy, as well as a scientific study. For your central point, you could formulate it as a statement, a rhetorical question, or a dilemma. And each of your arguments might have one of the following purposes, depending on what you think is the best tactic. You might extend the opponent's logic to show an absurdity or contradiction. You could use their points for your own side. You could point out alternative consequences of your opponent's ideas. This might be that they have a negligible impact, that they're outweighed by the risks, or actually harmful to the opponent's own goals. After microstructure, you learn macrostructure, the art of shaping the entire debate landscape. Here, you're going to learn how to group arguments around key issues and to contrast clashing points, how to prioritize your arguments based on the strengths and weaknesses in the opposing case. Macrostructure is more like strategically directing your armies on the battlefield, like a general. At the highest level of macrostructure, we encounter the power of definitions. Debates on significant issues, like abortion, often hinge on the interpretation of key issues and questions, making it crucial to persuade your audience that your definitions are fair. Both these aspects of structure allow you to choose arguments strategically, preempt your opponent's moves, and defend your case from attack. Now that we've laid the groundwork of argument, it's time to explore the second aspect, which is signposting. Signposting is your way of guiding your audience through the intricacies of your argument to make it more easily understood. Here are 3 concepts to leverage to make your arguments resonate. The first is the burden of proof in the debate, where you're going to tell your audience what your opponent needs to prove and how you might have met that bar already. Second are value judgments. Analyze the values underlying your argument and then explain why they're more important than the other side's principles. Again, controversial debates might come down to which principles should take priority. In the abortion debate, is it pro-life or pro-choice which is more important? That's going to inform your conclusion. Now, third is your framing. The way you describe people, arguments, and the debate as a whole will construct a favourable narrative, and that can be crucial in winning your audience round. Use your introductions and conclusions as your tools to get this framing across. Why do these signposts matter? Well, Against an opponent with equally powerful arguments, success might depend on whether your signposting is clearer than theirs. While mastering the art of argument is essential, it also has limitations. Arguments alone, no matter how eloquent or compelling, can sometimes be like a rudderless ship, untethered to anything concrete. This is where the art of evidence steps in as our anchor to reality, because it can form a solid foundation upon which to build and evaluate our argument. The second step to mastering public debate is the art of evidence. While argument encourages you to use any old fact to support your point, evidence makes you look at facts objectively and decide which arguments are reasonable and which are misleading. Now, there are two main ways to do this. The first is the top-down approach. You immerse yourself in all the available facts and you try to come to the right conclusion. Healthcare uses this approach. For example, in the UK, we have a government agency called NICE, which meticulously creates clinical guidelines based on exhaustive reviews of evidence that take months to years to complete. Most individuals don't have that kind of time, but a potential option is to look at the highest quality evidence that exists so far. But how can you tell which evidence is best? Luckily, this work has already been done for you by public health doctors. The evidence quality pyramid shows us a spectrum with anecdotes and expert opinion at the bottom of the pyramid. Social media commenters don't even get a look in here. And meta-analyses and systematic reviews at the top, which collate separate evidence together. When two pieces of evidence conflict, we go with the one with the highest quality, because the smaller study is more likely to be affected by random variations from the true answer, something which is called sampling bias. But wait a moment, don't get too excited by this, because often with complex issues, the evidence is frustratingly scarce. AI might help with this in the future, but for now, if you're researching a complex issue, your biggest problem might be a lack of finding study. So the second way is the bottom-up approach, analysing a claim or study to see if it really holds water. To do this, you have to look at where the information came from. If it was a scientific paper, you want to look at the study design, the control groups, the populations, and look for flaws that might weaken the conclusion. If you want more detail on this, there's a video in the description. If the evidence stands up to scrutiny, you might base arguments and inferences on it, even though it's not conclusive proof. But if your examination reveals a flaw or weakness, you discount it from the debate, or you can refute others who are using it. For more on this, I'd suggest you pick up the public health professor Trish Greenhall's short book, How to Read a Paper, because she succinctly and eloquently teaches the process in more detail. So let's recap. Whereas we need argument to inform our value judgments and make decisions, evidence helps us notice when arguments are factually wrong. So why do we need a third art? Well, even if you have a perfect argument, no one is going to listen to it if you can't make it sound good. That brings us on to eloquence. While the previous two arts teach you what to say, the art of eloquence is about how you say it. And while Aristotle's concepts of ethos and pathos give us a great starting point, I found that there's many more micro skills at play here, so let's break it down into 5 different areas. Let's consider Martin Luther King and the timeless impact of his iconic speech during the civil rights movement.
Tired of marching for something that should have been mine at birth. I don't mind saying to you tonight. I don't mind saying to you tonight that I'm tired of the tension surrounding our day. I don't mind saying to you tonight that I'm tired of living every day under the threat of death. I have no martyr complex. I want to live as long as anybody in this building tonight, and sometimes I begin to doubt whether I'm going to make it through. I must confess I'm tired.
So how is he sounding so good? King already had a lot of ethos because of his credentials, qualifications, and reputation. But without the art of eloquence, he could have come across like a qualified but boring professor giving a lecture. Instead, he enhances his message with confident delivery, rhythm, fluency, a concise yet powerful language style, and a pathos appeal. Let's look at delivery first. See how he projects confidence and authority with his body language, gestures, and where his eyes are looking. Trying to perform your sentences as Dr. King does, rather than just say or read them, will make you more engaging. He's cool under pressure, which gives us the confidence in him as a person. Then there's rhythm and meter of your speech and its fluency. What do I mean by meter? Well, here's an example to make it clearer. Here's a scene. Which of these two descriptions sounds better? Sunny skies and buzzing bees, summer's warmth and gentle breeze. Or, the sun has just come out and it's shining on the fields and there's some wildlife and it's boring. Next, there's fluency. This is something I really struggled with because of all the ums and ahs that come into your speech naturally. What's helped me get out of that habit was one of the warm-up games we played in debating club called Just a Minute, where you have to speak continuously without hesitation, repetition, or deviation, where someone else can take your turn. Drills like these can make you more fluent over time. What happened with me is that my speech slowed down so that I could think and speak at the same time. The most complex area in the Art of Eloquence is language style, and the two aspects I suggest you prioritise are concision and impactful language patterns. Concision involves cutting out waste and redundancy in our speech. So if I make the argument, corporal punishment is like child abuse, I don't have to say every part of the argument, the audience can work out the rest. Secondly, there are lots of specific language techniques called rhetorical devices that make speech more compelling and have been shown to influence your believability. This might be how you create memorable images through metaphors, descriptions, similes. It also can apply to your sentence structures. Anaphora, parallelism, and antithesis are just a few examples, and Martin Luther King uses them all in the Dream Speech. These previous 4 skills are something we can all work on with ourselves, but the last aspect, pathos, gives us a way of appealing to others that isn't based on words, arguments, or facts. It might be the most powerful. Instead, pathos allows Martin Luther King to pull at our emotions, something that he knew he had to do in order to connect with people to overcome racist sentiment. Now, it's common to hear that people don't like using pathos because they think it's unethical, but I think if sensible people shun using these tactics, they'll end up losing to weaker arguments. This is exactly what happened with the UK's Brexit referendum, when the populist Leave campaign leveraged people's nostalgia and patriotism using a dodgy claim that £350 million per week would go to the National Health Service. No matter how much the government tried to use logic or fear to refute these claims, they lost the emotional case, and no amount of reason could make up for it. What I take from this is that leveraging pathos requires a great understanding of your audience's hopes, values, fears related to what you're talking about. There's a few things to say about how you avoid being manipulated by pathos as well. So now when I read people's opinions and articles, I notice how their emotionally charged images are built through using biased adjectives, tone of voice, and framing. Left-wingers tend to appeal to hope for a fairer society and outrage at injustice, while right-wingers and capitalists more often appeal to nostalgia, to responsibility, fear of outsiders. Some specific issues lend themselves to emotional hooks, whether it's talking about children in times of war, or the incompetence or malice in a rival party.
Can I ask you something?
Yeah.
Are you a mother?
Yes.
What would you think if your children would have been executed in front of your eyes? Would you expect your government to think about those Nazis committing those crimes and to say, wait a second, first of all, we need to protect the enemy, and then to protect my children? Your children come as priority to your Prime Minister.
These emotional arguments remain persuasive even when the rational arguments don't stand up. But next time you hear a leader doing this, you won't be so easily manipulated. Now, if you're wanting to use these 3 arts to become a true master of rhetoric, but for some inexplicable reason, today's not the day you fancy picking up Aristotle, here's a playlist that'll start your journey. And if you want some quick tactics for sounding eloquent when challenged, watch this one instead. Remember to subscribe if you want to support the content, and I'll see you in the next video.